Hey, in today's video, we're going to discuss taking the measurements. So far you should have had the 3-day food diary video. And then also we discussed in the last video, taking pictures. Taking measurements can sometimes bring some of the issues we discussed in the last video where people don't like what they're actually doing, what they're seeing. So I just want you to think back about the importance of this 12-week journey. It's about creating a bulletproof version of yourself. But our starting point is important, and sometimes we've got to rip that plaster off or open the unopened mail to see where we're at. Now the measurements can be a little tricky because you may get a bit of variability with reading. So you may want to get someone to do it for you so they know where they're taking them from. There'll also be a document which I've sent to you which shows you exactly where to take the measurements from, because it can be very different in different places. It might not be exactly around the right part of the back, or you might not have the bony part of the hips. What's important is consistency. Now, the more measurements you take, the better the data we have, because you might find you're just about hitting the right spot with each reading, but over the course of weeks and then months, you'll see the pattern of where you're at. If you haven't got a tape measure, don't worry, I'll send you a link to get one. Amazon will get you one in 24 hours time. Doesn't need to be super expensive, just get a bog standard one. But it's important that you start to do this. You also may be someone who is resisting using scales as well. What's important is why we are taking the measurements. Sometimes you might not notice your weight has changed or your body's changed over the week from week to week. But with the stats and the data, I can tell you exactly what has happened. Because if you're someone who hasn't exercised for a while and you start to exercise, you may start to increase lean tissue or muscle mass. And that might look on the scales that nothing has changed, but then the measurements have come down and I'll be able to say to you, your body has changed shape because we've got the stats on your circumferences, so your waist and your hip measurements have come down, even though the actual weight on the scales has stayed the same. Because quite often people look at the weight on the scales and they say it's either good or bad based on what I weigh. And we need more scientific evidence to look at what has changed over the 12-week period. So that's really why we are doing this. Even though you might have resistance, still feel and trust why we're doing it, and maybe go back to the last video and go through some of the judgments that you may place on yourself by taking these measurements. But that's it for measurements today, and I shall see you in the next video or on the coaching call.